Wild animals tend to avoid humans, but the beast in our story today acted on the contrary. He actually came to the people. What prompted him to do this and how this story ends, we will tell you now. So pour yourself a cup of coffee and get comfortable. Jacob lived in a small town called McCarthy. It was a picturesque village nestled among mountains and wilderness. The quickest and easiest way to get to the nearest city was by helicopter. In summer, it was still possible to drive an off-road vehicle, but in winter, the inhabitants were literally cut off from civilization and food had to be delivered to the village by air. Each household had several dogs, since dog sleds were the most convenient transport in winter. Jacob himself owned about a dozen beautiful dogs. One morning, when Jacob was still sleeping, all the dogs howled almost simultaneously. He realized that something out of the ordinary had happened because the dog's behavior was so unusual. Jacob quickly put on his jacket, grabbed a double-barreled gun just in case, and went out into the yard. He was surprised to discover a gray wolf curled up on his porch. The wolf was apparently seriously injured as there was a long trail of blood behind him. The dogs barked loudly and growled in an attempt to drive the enemy out of their territory, but the wolf was so weak that he could not even raise his head in their direction. Jacob bent over the beast to assess the extent of the injuries. Unfortunately, he immediately saw two very deep wounds. Apparently, the wolf was attacked by a wild bear and they had fought for a long time. Jacob went into the house to grab a blanket and a walkie-talkie and then went back out onto the porch. He covered the poor, trembling animal with a blanket and radioed a veterinarian from the city. It was common practice to radio a veterinarian whenever one of the local dogs got sick, so it only took a couple of hours for him to arrive. He carefully helped Jacob lift the wolf onto a blanket to be carried into the warm house. Very soon, having warmed up, the animal stretched out on a mat and the veterinarian was able to start examining him. Just in case, they bound the wolf's mouth shut so that he would not bite the doctor out of fear or in pain. But the wolf, as if sensing that they wanted only good things for him, lay still and tried not to move. The wolf only whimpered slightly, but did not show a single sign of aggression. Soon, the veterinarian determined the wolf to only be about a year old. He had lost a lot of blood and the wounds were very torn, so the best thing they could do was to perform an operation to sew up the wounds. Right then and there, the doctor performed all the necessary procedures to help the beast. Afterwards, he told Jacob to keep the animal warm until he was able to get up on his own, and then he could be transferred to a kennel. The veterinarian also warned that it was better not to let the animal go back into the forest until he was fully recovered, as this could cost him his life. Leaving the necessary medications, the veterinarian left. For several days, the wolf barely moved, but gradually his appetite returned to him, and when he was able to eat on his own, his strength began to return. Jacob soon moved the wolf to one of his dog's enclosures. At first, the dogs barked at their new neighbor, but quickly realized that he was weak and sick and changed their anger to mercy. Soon, Jacob took a chance and let a couple of the dogs come into the wolf's space. Surprisingly, the dogs started licking his wounds and even shared their food. After that, Jacob completely removed the partition between the enclosures and allowed the dogs and the wolf to live together. The dogs took care of their new friend as much as they could, bringing him their toys, sharing their food with him, licking his wounds, and sleeping near him, warming him with their bodies. Very soon, the wolf completely recovered and even started running with the dogs. It was then that Jacob decided it was time to let him go back into the forest where he belonged. He opened the enclosure and let the beast go. The wolf hesitated, looked up at the man, then in the direction of the dogs, and then took off towards the forest. Jacob actually felt a little sad, but he decided that this was the best thing for everyone and went back into the house. When evening came, Jacob suddenly heard a familiar howl. He looked out the window and saw the wolf, who was calmly sitting in the enclosure. Jacob went out and said, "What are you doing here? Did they not accept you back into the forest?" All the dogs were happy to have their friend back, so Jacob let the wolf stay in the kennel again that night. The next morning, Jacob opened the enclosure again to let the wolf go, but he was quietly sitting in his place and not going anywhere. So he made it clear to the man that his home is now here and he would not leave. Several years passed, and the wolf stayed with Jacob and even started pulling a sled with the rest of the dogs. All of the neighbors wondered how the beast could be tamed. What do you think? How did Jacob do it? Maybe the wolf was so grateful for his salvation that he thanked his new master in this way? Or was he so used to the dogs that he did not want to leave them? Share your opinion in the comments. It will be very interesting for us to read what you think. And if you enjoyed this story, then please click the like button, subscribe to our channel, and click on the bell so as not to miss our new videos. Until next time.